So the day has finally come. I'm about to head in to watch The Batman. This is my most anticipated film of 2022. Batman is one of my two favorite comic book characters, and if multiple Oscar winner Ben Affleck wasn't able to do his Batfleck film, Matt Reeves probably would have been my number 2 pick to direct this film. I think they've got the right crew. I think they got the right cast. All the trailers have looked awesome. I cannot wait to watch this film. So now I'm gonna head in and watch it, and then I'm gonna let you know what I thought. So I just got out of seeing The Batman, and it was... Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. If you've seen The Batman, did it live up to the hype? And if you haven't seen it yet, what is your hype level for the film? With that said, let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, this is the Batman story I've been waiting for in live action form, and the movie I hoped it would be. And what I mean by that is that I've wanted a detective story. Batman is the world's greatest detective, but most movies just have him do a little bit of investigating, and then it's mostly an action film or crime thriller. This is a movie about Batman investigating a series of murders, putting a bunch of clues together, and in doing so, helping us as the audience understand this version of Gotham and how the Wayne family fits into its history. The movie is clearly inspired and influenced by David Fincher's Seven and Zodiac, with just the way they're doing this investigation, the nature of Riddler and how he's committing his crimes, how he's communicating with the public. You can see David Fincher's influence all over this film. And I've been saying for years that I think Batman would do well as a TV series because he is a detective, so long-form storytelling would serve him well. And this movie feels like the most epic 5-part Batman miniseries of all time, where it just takes its time to kind of do this investigation. You can almost feel where the episode breaks could be. And when I say it's like the greatest miniseries of all time, that's meant as a compliment, not as a criticism. Another cool thing about the movie is that Gotham feels lived in. Like it just has this rich history, and each character has their own place in the story that ties into someone else's backstory. All of it feels developed, thought through. Characters don't feel like cardboard cutouts. They don't feel like they're just plopped into a story. They all tie into this greater mythology that's being developed. And because of that, you can have Riddler, Penguin, and a bunch of corrupt politicians and mobsters all as villains in the movie, and it doesn't feel overcrowded because it's just a city pre-populated with fully developed characters that you understand them, who they are immediately once you meet them, but there's always more you could learn about them. But even with the way the story is structured as this detective story, as this mystery, it sets it up to have lots of big, vibrant characters. Riddler is essentially the story that sets everything in motion.
This is about a king, and Riddler's the match.
But even though he's all throughout the entire film, he's not present interacting with the other characters. He's just someone that progresses the plot forward, and you just get these creepy glimpses of him for most of the film. And this causes Batman to continue his investigation, where he meets all of these characters that have this rich history tied into it. One of those characters he meets is Penguin, who is a side character, but just feels fleshed out. And when you have someone like Colin Farrell in the role, in this transformative performance where you do not see Colin at all, you just see Oswald Cobblepot.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart.
It just makes every interaction interesting because the characters have so much depth to them and so much history. And the other side of that is that this is a Batman heavy story. Robert Pattinson is in the bat suit investigating these murders all throughout the film. Like, he is meeting with people, he's going into clubs, he's talking with Commissioner Gordon, he's meeting with Catwoman. All throughout the entire film, he is front and center, and usually in the bat suit or in the bat cave. It is a heavy Batman story from beginning to end. Doesn't waste any time on backstory. He does have a bit of an arc. He does grow in the film, but he is in Batman mode when he's introduced, and that's where he stays throughout the runtime of the film. And on that note, this is a very broken Bruce Wayne who is obsessed with the mission. It's not an origin story, but it is early in his career, so he's not as mature. He's not thinking as holistically.
Your family has a history of philanthropy, but as far as I can tell, you're not doing anything.
And he's driven very much like by rage, so you have this very vicious streak to this version of the character.
I'm vengeance.
It still manages to put these little subtle nuances to him where you can tell when he sees a child, there's a softness in him to protect that child from the pain that he felt. There's all these little details that they put in there to make it so that he's not just this intense person. There's more going on, and he's learning to be the better version of Batman. Speaking of those key relationships, Catwoman is all throughout this entire movie. She shows up very early on in the investigation, and then she's kind of pretty pivotal to the story all throughout. And as I mentioned before, all of the characters have these rich ties to this history in Gotham, and they have connections to one another. So she just feels fleshed out. She feels like a real person that has lived a life in this city, interacting with all these other characters. So it makes sense that she's showing up in the story, that she cares about what's taking place. She has a fun chemistry with Batman, and the way they work with each other, kind of respect each other. And so it just feels like a classic Batman, Catwoman attraction to one another.
You got a lot of cats.
I have a thing about strays.
Where she's certainly not a hero, but she also can partner up with Batman at the same time. And the other partner in here is Commissioner Gordon, that also is present all throughout the entire story. And he doesn't necessarily have like a big arc, and it's not like they develop the character a lot, but Jeffrey Wright has such a strong screen presence that even though he's kind of used just to be this character that's the middleman between Batman and the police and helps with these investigations, you enjoy watching him on screen because he is such a strong performer. And then, as you've seen from the trailers, there's a lot of just gorgeous shots in this movie that are just framed to perfection to just have these epic moments for Batman. And he's even talked about in some interviews over the last couple of weeks how he used VR to discover some of these cool shots that you see in the trailers, and then even more that you see in the movie. So he just knows how to frame things in a way that just looks gorgeous. And of course, once the movie comes out, there'll be plenty of discussion of what is the best Batman movie. And I would say this movie sits nicely with the other great Batman movies. Batman Begins gives us a great Batman origin story. The Dark Knight gives us a great Batman crime thriller. Zack Snyder's Justice League gives us a great Batman team-up movie. And this gives us a great Batman detective story. Depending on your taste, depending on what stories you resonate with, you can pick any one of these as your favorite Batman movie, and it makes sense to me. Or if you like animated, you got Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I think it sits nicely in that. There's going to be a group of people that are going to love the fact that this is a Batman detective story with such a rich, lived-in Gotham. All of that said, there are some problems here and some things that won't sit right with everyone, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. And of course, the first thing you gotta talk about here is that the movie is 3 hours long, and it's not a fast-paced Marvel roller coaster ride. It's 3 hours of detective noir with some action thrown in here and there. So for some people, it's just gonna be too long and too slow. Other thing you gotta talk about here is that this is a hard PG-13. And I would guess if it wasn't a property like Batman where WB could pour all of their resources into getting the rating that they want, this movie probably would have been rated R. They pushed the limits with language. They pushed the limits with what they have the Riddler do, as he's a serial killer, and they go right up to the line of every single thing you can do with violence, viciousness, implied violence before crossing it and going into that R-rated territory. And there's some even things in here that were reminiscent of Saw movies that are they don't show it like the Saw movies, but they imply things. Some people aren't going to like that. It's not going to sit right with them. It's obviously not a kid's movie, but it is definitely a Batman movie made for adults, which I thoroughly enjoy as an adult, but you have to keep that in mind. It is a slower film. It is a hard PG-13 film. And final thing on here, there's no post-credit scene. There is a little thing at the end that you can wait till the end of the credits, and it's a little amusing bit. It's not a scene. It's nothing like that. If you've been holding your pee for 90 minutes and the credits start rolling, you can get out of there and you can go pee. You don't need to hold it to see the little bit that's at the end. From there, let's move on to the bad. And when it comes to the negatives with this movie, there's really two things that are kind of related to each other that are big issues, and then there's several smaller issues. The first big issue is that as a movie, I simply don't think this needed to be 3 hours long. Had it been like 5 episodes of a miniseries, I think the pacing would have been fine because you watch a miniseries differently than you watch a movie. But as a movie where you're just sitting there watching it in one sitting, I think it needed to be tightened up, and the length is compounded by the second big issue, and I'll call it the crescendo problem. And I'm not really going into spoilers with what I'm about to say, but this is the closest to giving specifics about what happens in the movie. And essentially, in the first 10 minutes, a series of mysteries are introduced, and the next 2 hours are all about investigating these mysteries and answering certain questions. And once those questions are answered, there's still 40 minutes left in the film. And so it feels a little bit like the tension has been released. You're ready for the movie to be over with, and then you have 40 more minutes of runtime, and that starts to make you feel the runtime even more. But it feels a little bit like they let the air out of the balloon a little bit too soon, and this leads to some trickle down in the final battle. It's a cool action sequence with plenty of Batman beating people up and the side characters joining in, but because there's not like a specific plot beat that we've been working towards the entire film, there's not a specific person you're trying to overcome, it doesn't have that moment of satisfaction and emotional release because that sort of already happened in the film by the time you get to the final battle. And it's frustrating because the movie has little moments of emotional payoff, but they're more subtle and they're spaced out. And so you can't think of like specific moments where it all kind of crescendos. A classic example being like at the very end of The Dark Knight, when they give the Dark Knight speech, the movie crescendos and you just feel so amped up about the story you just watched. This isn't really like that. It hints at some things, it teases it, but it doesn't crescendo with big moments. And I think because of that, some people might leave feeling a little bit disappointed because they can compare it to previous Batman films or other Marvel movies that have had that crescendo, and you don't get it as much with this film. A few minor things that pulled me out of the movie just a little bit. First one, Batman sustains an enormous amount of damage and just keeps on kicking as if nothing happened. I mean, he gets shot a bazillion times, he gets blown up, he's in a very violent crash, and they do show him getting knocked out at certain points in time, but there's never any lingering consequences after the scene where he gets knocked out, despite the fact that he probably has significant brain damage. Along these same lines, as you can see in the trailer, there's a number of scenes where he's just like walking towards dudes that are firing machine guns at him, and he's not making any effort to dodge the bullets. That just feels like a very strange way to present Batman. And the final one on here is that while there is some cool action in the movie, and you've seen a lot of it in the trailer, there's not like that one big standout action sequence like we got the warehouse fight in Batman v Superman. There's not something like that in this movie, and I feel that's kind of disappointing. Real quick, before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. If you haven't seen the movie, what is your hype level for it? And if you have seen it, did it live up to the hype? Also, I've been working to review all of the previous Batman films leading up to the release of The Batman. You can check those out up in this playlist up here, and also over the next couple of weeks, I will be putting out a bunch of Batman rankings. Over the last couple of months, a bunch of people have been hyping this movie up as potentially the greatest comic book movie of all time. I don't think that's what this is. It's not the instant classic that a bunch of people hoped it would be. But I still think it's a great Batman story that complements the other great Batman movies really nicely. If you go in with your expectations in check, I think you'll have a great time at the movies and see a great Batman movie. Overall, I'm gonna go with an A- on the entertainment scale, a 9.2 out of 10. And you should definitely go and watch this movie. But keep in mind, it is 3 hours long, prepare appropriately, and it is a hard PG-13. It is not for younger viewers. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to check out my other Batman reviews right over there. I got those Batman rankings coming over the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.